Here we are back again in the fishbowl of the ESPC conference, and we are having another guest with us today. It's Director of Program Management, was it?
Vice President.
Vice President, sorry. Yeah,
That's okay.
Vice President. So many acronyms and letters and commas in your title,
Yes.
so yes.
It's so important.
Alex Simons, anyway, thank you for being with us here at the conference.
Yeah.
And you gave a great keynote today showcasing all up identity and security stuff that's coming out of Microsoft now. And we were just talking about that, you and I, just before we went live here, that there is so many things, so many ways now that you can do the right thing, finally, I guess. Because back in the day when Azure began, and it was young, there were some features, of course, you could log in and you could do some of the right things, but now we got so many more tools and ways to do the right thing with security.
Yeah, Magnus, I mean, that's a really good point. We're trying really hard to make sure that our customers, we joke about it as we want customers to fall into the pit of success.
Yes.
Right, so we want to make sure that the default models that we offer for people are secure by default, but they don't over-privilege their users. In fact, one of the big things we announced at Ignite was that we're making the multi-factor authentication through the Authenticator app free to everybody.
Which is great.
I think that's a big improvement.
It is.
And so it's just, we continually try to make sure that people can do the right thing rather than setting themselves up to be hacked.
Yeah, I'm very happy about that fact, that you are making that available to everyone, because, I mean, there is this is security and identity we're talking about. Sure, you, Microsoft, need to make money, and you will make money from us using your great services. It's also very difficult to say, yeah, it's going to cost you extra to actually be secure.
Yeah, well, so we take our responsibility for helping customers get secure very seriously.
Of course.
Right, and so particularly for our small and medium-sized customers, we want them to not have to worry about it at all. Right, like they have pretty simple security needs. We want them to just be secure by default and have all the things that they need.
That's right.
For our more sophisticated enterprise customers who have a lot of additional kind of customizations and policy settings that they want to be able to do, those are much more expensive for us to provide.
Yep.
So so those ones we do charge for.
Absolutely true. So let's talk about that. I mean, you're talking in your keynote about how to make any kind of application secure and sort of onboard into our security realm inside of the corporation. Yeah. And tell me about that.
Well, so getting all of the applications hooked up to Azure AD and the entire Enterprise Mobility Suite is a big focus for us.
Yes.
Right, so we don't want this to just be a service for the Microsoft Cloud. We want people to be able to use this for all of their apps, whether those are apps that are running on-premise, whether they're, even if they're running in Amazon, or it's something like Salesforce.com or Concur or something like that. We want to make sure you can bring all those together. So we do that in a bunch of ways, right? So we have really great support for open standards. So we always support the latest in OAuth 2 and OpenID Connect. We have increasingly rich support for SAML 2, so we're bringing a lot of new capabilities in to let you harness traditional SAML applications. We can also, though, get back to your on-premise applications. So if you have older Windows-based applications that are maybe using something like Kerberos, something like that, we can help you integrate with those. And then in the spring, we're even going to turn on header-based authentication. Wow. So all of your kind of old legacy applications that support any of those models
now be able to come in here.
Yeah, they'll be able to hooked up. But then we also want to make it so that it's really easy for developers to essentially self-service, right? Because in a large enterprises, what we've learned is the central identity team can really be a bottleneck for the development team, right? Yeah. So we've just added a whole new set of roles for app developers to let them go in and do app development specific things for their apps without having to be a global administrator or have broader capabilities. Right. Right. So now you can really delegate out to the app owners to do that. And then we've got the whole set of capabilities in the Azure portal for registering and managing applications. So now your app teams can go get their applications in, get them registered and managed without the central IT team getting in the way. And then the identity team and the security team can just set the policies that then govern access to those apps.
And that's very, very handy. In fact, oftentimes I've seen that scenario where you want to do the right thing, but you have to actually wait, like you said, for the bottleneck to give the proper access. And there's always a risk that you will go around security and find some other route. You find some connection string or some other way into a system because you don't want to wait for doing the right thing.
Anytime there's a bottleneck like that, what we've learned is that the development teams will find a way around it, and it may not be the way you wanted.
Exactly.
Right. So like we like to joke about how you can't have Tony in the identity team be the only guy who can push the buttons. You got to be able to distribute that out, but do it in a least privileged model so that the people you distribute to can only do the small number of things you need them to do.
Yeah, and so least privilege, actually, reminds me also to cover here the thing about privileged identity management, so that you're able to, in fact, and I know for a fact that a lot of people out there don't know what this is or how it works, or that it actually does exist in Azure, that you're able to set a role on a user kind of like in a deactivated dormant mode, and that person can request access. So
yeah,
tell me.
Well, so the risk here is that you don't want to have a bunch of high-powered accounts permanently sitting around, right? So I don't want to have a bunch of global administrators or a bunch of security administrators full-time, because that's just attack surface for somebody to go after. Right? So what we really want is we want our administrators to be eligible, that's what we call them, eligible to get into those roles, but normally to be out of them.
Exactly.
And then so they go into the Azure portal and they request to activate that role. That puts them into it for a limited time frame. They can go do a very specific task and then be automatically removed. Maybe 30 minutes or an hour later, they're automatically removed from the role, so that then you're back to a very secure footprint instead of having that extended attack surface.
Yeah, and that's exactly what you needed. That's what you wanted all along, and I'm really happy that we're able to use that now in Azure and with anything else, in fact, right?
Yeah, that's right. You can use that with any of the applications that you hook up to Azure Active Directory.
Exactly. And so you also showcased Sentinel in there, and Sentinel is kind of, well, it's new to us in the Microsoft world. It's a service to help you overview and look at all your incidents and potential threats and risks.
So Sentinel is a brand new service. You know, they've just done their first general availability at Ignite. What it does is it gives you a cloud-based SIEM that lets you bring in all of the data from your various systems. So obviously, the data from Azure and the data from Office 365 come in automatically.
All of those data connectors, right? You connect all kinds of sources of data.
All kinds of sources, but it also has connectors for all these things. You can, I mean, you'd be surprised. Like, you can bring in signal from your Cisco routers. You can bring in signal from your F5 endpoints, right? Like, so all of these different connectors are already built into Sentinel to bring all that data in. So now you've got one place to go and explore logs and do investigations. But Sentinel also has a whole bunch of smarts built in to help you, basically using machine learning, identify what's anomalous behaviors, and then also to go in, do investigations, and then to automate the whole process of essentially how do you want to manage the follow-up on any incident. It's really very powerful, that combination of the bringing everything together in one cloud place, being able to then run machine learning to see what's happening and understand what's anomalous, and then finally to automatically take action on it in a very regimented way, instead of just humans kind of having to poke buttons.
And that's key, I think, because obviously we will not always be there, right? The machines will always be there. And two, there's not enough time to classify all potential risks and kind of wade through all the things that weren't actually a risk, but you could have removed those using a machine. And when you wither it down to the real stuff, one concern, or not a concern, but I'm very curious about how, the risk of actually missing something that was a real threat. But I guess we as humans would do that as well as the machine. I mean, the machine can make a mistake.
Well, so let's talk about both sides of that. We know from a lot of well-publicized enterprise attacks, right, that an awful lot of the time the signal that showed you someone was attacking and there was something wrong actually made it into their SIEM, but it was lost in the noise. Right? There were so many things that they didn't know which to focus on. Right? So you really need a system that can highlight the super important things for you and take away and essentially automate the mitigation for all the low risk things. Right? So that's the approach we take in Azure AD Identity Protection, right? Which is we want to set up a system that can handle 99% of all of the incidents for you automatically, and then you can really just focus in on those super unique new things that are higher risk. Right? So that's a really nice approach to it. But we're also super careful to watch our rates for false positives and false negatives, right? So it's okay to have a slightly high false positive rate. We think it's an attacker, but it's not. And so maybe a user gets challenged for a multi-factor authentication once in a while that they shouldn't. Right? So our false positive rate tends to run between 2 to 3%. So we're over challenging on MFAs 2 or 3% of the time. But that's good because then we're being extra secure.
You're error on the side of caution.
That's right, error on the side of caution. And then we watch our false negative rate super closely, right? So our false negative rate on most days runs less than 0.5%.
Oh, okay.
Right? And so we're continually trying to close that gap as well, but we always want to make sure that we're over challenging rather than under challenging.
Okay, great. Well, as you can clearly hear, there is so much to talk about security and identity, and we could probably do that, well, most of the day. You could do that all week.
All week, yeah. That's what I do every week, all week.
Exactly.
Yes.
All right, great. But we will let you all go from this live stream now. Thank you guys for being with us and listening to us here from the ESPC conference, together here with Alex Simons of Identity.
Thank you, Matt.